Welcome to the Tournament Center. I'm Randy Buehler here with Brian David Marshall. It is team day at the World Championships, and teams this year, a little bit different. Pretty cool, in my opinion. They're playing two-headed giant. So unlike previous years where there were three-person teams and they were doing Team Rochester, now it's four-person teams, and that means every round they pair off. There's this two-headed giant pair, and then there's this other two-headed giant pair. Over the course of the day, they're actually going to do three distinct drafts. So they get to draft in every permutation of the four people. Each team member gets to draft with each other team member once. 6 rounds over the course of the day. Those points get added to the points they accumulated from the individuals, and we'll boil it down to 2 teams to play for the finals on Sunday. Now, Gar, what do you think's been interesting?
Well, one of the things I think is really interesting is the way the point scoring works.
Yeah, it's a good point.
So normally a match win in any kind of Pro Tour event is worth 3 points.
Right.
In this case, since you have 2 units playing, each unit is worth 3 points on its own if you win. Right. But if both of your teams win and you sweep the opposing team, it's actually worth 9 total. So you get these sort of 3 mystery points for sweeping.
It's more like, if you think about it, it's kind of like the overall round. It's always, you're always playing the same opponents, by the way. You've got, the tables are mirrors of each other. So if it's, Switzerland, Japan, Czech, Austria drafting at a pod, well, there's another pod with exactly the same countries on it, so that you can just have the countries are always paired.
And it's going to be the same, right? It's going to be the same.
So it's always like Switzerland versus Japan. Now, if Switzerland sweeps Japan, they get 9 points for a match win. If it's 1-1, well, that's a draw, so it's only worth 3 points. It's kind of like normal points, but multiplied by 3.
Right.
Which is how the team format's always worked. It's always been 9 points for a win. That's on team day.
Right.
Now, what that means, though, is that there's just a huge value to winning. If you sweep the round, that's worth 9 points. You get a couple of splits, and it's only worth 3 apiece. So, for example, Switzerland has now opened up a nice lead. They've swept both their opponents so far today. Suddenly, they're up 12 points on the field.
Right, and that means they've picked up 18 points over 2 rounds.
Absolutely. Japan, meanwhile, is sitting in second place. They've got 2 splits. So, they've gone 2-2, but they're only worth 6 points the way they've done it.
And that's the 12-point gap.
Exactly. Czech Republic is come from behind and has leapt into 3rd place now via 2 wins. 4-0 on their game so far today, so they're in good shape. You got Austria in 4th with a sweep and a loss. Poor Israel sitting in 5th place. They were flying high.
They were on top of the world yesterday.
Yes. 1 point so far today. That means they got swept, and in their other match, they got a loss and a draw. So 1 point out of a potential 18 so far. Not good for them. The Dutch have a split and a win, so they're in it at 6th place.
The Dutch are the reigning champions at this in Team Worlds.
Right. The Dutch won this last year. The year before that, it was the Japanese. The once mighty Americans who used to own this format, used to win this, what, like 8 out of the first 10 or something? 27th?
Yeah, they're not having a good weekend.
No,
Michael Jacobs called it the worst weekend of Magic in his career.
Wow. Yeah, LSV put up a nice top 32 finish, got himself to level 5, but...
Can only imagine where they'd be without the top 32.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the other guys, I'm not sure any of them were above 500.
The Dutch team, by the way, also features Roel van Heeswijk, who's playing
in the top 8.
Who's playing in the top 8 tomorrow.
Right, Uri Peleg is on the Israeli team as well, and then Switzerland still sitting in 1st, being paced by Huber, who's the number 1 seed. Now, that's the format. That's how the points work out. That's how we've got. There's 4 rounds left, so still plenty of time for teams to make a run, but Swiss are certainly threatening to go wire to wire.
Right.
Now, how does the strategy work out for Lorwyn? Like, we saw two-headed giant at the Pro Tour. It wasn't Lorwyn, though. What does Lorwyn do to it?
Lorwyn two-headed giant draft is somewhere between the skill set you need for draft and card evaluations and knowing what the best cards are and the best strategies.
Okay.
And I think the best elements of sealed deck. In that, I mean, the fluidity to sort of design a game plan based around a pool of cards. A lot of times what happens is as the cards are coming around the table, you're taking the 2 best cards every time.
Okay.
You do make adjustments for the format.
Sure.
And you do make adjustments based on what cards you open. For example, I watched Stuart Wright and the UK team drafting this round, and they opened up Thundercloud Shaman. Suddenly, blind spot giants went up very high. They would have taken a Stink Drinker Devil over just about anything.
Sure.
And it looked like their draft was going one way. This is going to be our red-black deck. This is going to be our blue-white deck. And then suddenly there was a Brian Stoutarm in the mix. Suddenly there were a couple of other good white cards in the mix, and they had to readjust on the fly. They began resorting the cards. And when they sat down at the table to register their decks, they looked very different than what they thought they looked like at the table.
Okay.
Yeah, they said, we thought this deck was going to have the black, but that doesn't really work out. We actually want the smoke braider here. We want this deck to be blue-red. Became a little more elemental.
Yeah, Team Sealed is a pretty cool format. You get that where you're trying to build 2 decks simultaneously, and what's the best way to use the card pool. It sounds like Two-Headed Giant has a lot of those elements in it as well.
And there's card valuations change dramatically. The most
So
important
what's a good example of that?
Deep Tread Marrow.
Oh, okay.
It's a pretty mediocre, I don't want to say mediocre, but it's a middling Merfolk card.
Okay.
In one-on-one, you don't know that your opponent's going to have islands. Yes, you can give them islands. It's a little expensive to make it an island walk.
But a Two-Headed Giant, they've got 2 decks between them.
Absolutely.
Almost certainly one of them's got islands in it.
Bogstrider Ash goes up significantly. You know someone's going to be playing swamps. You know someone's going to be playing goblin spells if it's not your teammate, in terms of gaining life.
Sure.
Bogart Loggers is going to be much more likely to have forests to walk on, much more likely to have tree folks and changelings to destroy. So those kind of cards change very dramatically.
Cool.
There's not a lot of cards, and interestingly, like in the focus to keep everything, my merfolk get bonuses, right? Normally, Lord of Atlantis would be all...
Would help everybody, but yeah, here you want the tribes all in one deck because you can't...
Right. So I can't use my Regery to bonus your merfolk.
Right.
But interestingly, card like Fairy Tauntings. Fairy Tauntings is whenever, an opponent. So you can, there's some, you got to look around at the wording for how things work with an opponent, your cards, but.
Interesting. All right, so that's the story here on Team Day at Worlds. Switzerland looking good. Two-Headed Giant getting its debut for the Worlds Team Day. Brian and I will be here all day. We'll let you know how this competition plays out, and we'll be back later with more coverage of the top 8 individuals as well.
Good.